All right, I'm here with Cynthia Camlin, who's one of the artists in the organic show here at Columbia Center for the Arts this month. And Cynthia lives up in Washington and was gracious enough to send her work to us. And I just want to start out, Cynthia, by offering you an opportunity to tell us who you are and what you're interested in your work and kind of how you got to where you are
now. Well, I'm up in Bellingham area, Washington. Actually a little south of that because we live on a farm, but I teach at Western Washington University. I came here in 2008. I'd really never been in the Pacific Northwest, so I didn't have this connection to the Pacific Northwest, but I came here for this painting position. This summer I've become chair of the department. So, and it's a strange time to be chair of a department as we are dealing with COVID-19 and a partial reopening, but mainly remote classes, and there's a lot going on. In my work, I guess before I even came up to the Pacific Northwest, I was very much having a landscape and environmental kind of focus in my work. It really came out of post-colonial critique. I moved down to Texas for graduate school, and from Connecticut, from New Haven, though I grew up in the Southeast, and I was I felt like I had gotten into a covered wagon and gone west with my son as a single mom. And I was very interested in the colonial Western paintings that I was seeing in different museums. But at the same time, I was also like in, it was a .com bubble, and there was like massive growth, and all the ranch land around Austin was being eaten up for like McMansions. And so it was, I felt like I kind of got a window into the kind of strange paradigm of European landscape painting, which is very, very like colonially based, white settler based, which is of actual loss, actual conquest, actual loss, actual extraction, actual whatever, and symbolic recovery through art, which had a kind of sick logic to it that I was very interested in. And at the beginning, all my work was about that. But so I got more later, abstraction entered in, geology, early modernist ideas, on the way to sort of focusing on polar landscapes for a while. So when I came to Washington, it was really with a big focus on combining abstraction and pictorial modes of working with polar landscapes and melting ice and climate change increasingly. I don't know if I answered all your questions there, but that was
that's perfect. That's perfect. I remember the first time I saw your work was at Cornish College of the Arts, and you were in an exhibition there. And I was really struck by it, especially because of the scale of the work, and you were working in like watercolor medium and making these beautiful kind of iceberg forms. And, you know, as someone who's very interested in the history of landscape and also kind of where we're at with climate change, your work really spoke to me. And then on top of that, it had this very seductive quality to it. And, you know, I think a lot of that's something that kind of ties through in your practice. And I'm wondering, for folks who aren't familiar, if you can kind of talk about, you know, climate change as a subject matter and landscape as a subject matter. And then also, you know, I know that you've gone on exhibitions up to glaciers to study what's going on the ice and bring that back into your work. And if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the work using the the motif of the iceberg, or with, marine glaciers, which I used, like cracking marine glaciers, which I used in a lot of work over and over again, like a motif for, almost like a grid for talking about rigidity and fragmentation and movement. It's the same with the work in the that you're showing, Carolyn, right now with the coral reefs. I mean, I tend to take or I have many times taken kind of a motif and retooled it over and over again. Kind of controlling metaphor that I, kind of work with in a more formal way over and over. But the metaphor is rich in meaning, so it has this political or social or meaning at the same time as I have, within that framework, have a lot of freedom to do more material exploration and experimentation and formal things. So that's kind of how the icebergs were. There's like this psychological symbol, of like there being like something like tiny on top that we see, and then this giant, gargantuan, monstrous underneath that we can't fathom the scale of. And with the psychological metaphor, and then that's happening at the same time as like climate change denial, which is like this, this huge monstrous like set of circumstances and facts and science that we don't want to face, So that's how that kind of was starting. But so it's kind of like that. I get this metaphor. And so with the marine kind of shelves of kind of, breaking off, calving glaciers, I thought about ice. I thought about cities and architecture and the way we design things, that we need to be flexible and create, movable and flexible structures that can work with the conditions that are there, rather than, fight them and brace against them and build seawalls and build, giant flood walls, and, which none of which actually end up working. They're just like these short-term fixes. So I was just thinking about all that. I was also thinking about geology, just like, living here in the Northwest, these tectonic plates are subducting, and creating the Cascade Range, and they're going under, and they're like rock, and then at a certain point they start, instead of breaking, they bend, so there's a certain point where they're heated up enough where they start to bend, and there, that has like a name, a certain, like the something ductile barrier or whatever, where things start to bend. And I just thought a lot about that, because we're not bending yet. We're not kind of adapting to reality yet. We're bracing against it. We're fighting against it like it's like it's the 19th century. And we're, and I wonder if this year or the next few years, maybe that will change. There's so much disruption right now. There's so much breakage, maybe there will be some bending after November. We'll see. We'll see. To the rest of your question, I don't know, what was the rest of what was the end of your question?
Just thinking about like knowing your background of also being someone who's like been up onto the glaciers and physically like going to some of these places to do research and experience them, and how that's kind of influenced the work over time.
and I'm going to give you like a counterintuitive answer to that, Carolyn, because I've been in shows a lot with artists that work with scientists and that see their, are really collaborating with scientists. And, sometimes I've thought like, why can't I be more like that? Right? Because I'm not like that. I'm not really working with data. I'm not really partnering with the scientists so much. I've been in a bunch of shows with people that are doing that. And I think that I came across a quote actually today from Tim Ingold that says, like, art is not after science to explain it or communicate it, but before it, connecting science to wonder, encounter, even gratitude. And I think that that is where I am, that kind of art making. So we're talking about some similar things, but I'm more, I'm not all that helpful in terms of science communication.
Yeah. I think also for people that aren't familiar with your work, they're going to need to go to your social media, because and I think this has actually happened to a lot of people whose work I'm interested in because of the things that I inherently pay attention to in art. And over the past few months, I've really seen that a lot of folks whose work I follow, the meaning has kind of shifted because we were already working with these themes of, social movements and how these wider political issues are going to affect us. And your more recent work is very kind of on the nose right now, because you're painting these underwater scenes that not only kind of show ruins and different artifacts of civilization, but they show statues of
a lot of Confederate
people.
Yeah.
Which now is, in reality, something that's become a very big debate. And also, these statues have become these really interesting artifacts after they're graffitied. And I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about how you're viewing that work right now, and if the meaning has changed for you, or if you feel like what's happening is enhancing the work, or how you're responding to that.
I feel very much in the thick of it. It was the election, and then Charlottesville, and I just, these are places, like, I got a degree in Charlottesville, I lived there, and I lived in Richmond, and I lived in, North Carolina, I lived in coastal South Carolina, I lived in all these little towns growing up, and so when Trump got elected and these white supremacists started marching and becoming more visible, in that time, it was definitely an opportunity for me, and to reckon with my past, the past of my family, the past of, white privilege in the South and white supremacy. But, I come from kind of poor whites in the South. So this other kind of, all the sort of class and race complications that I come from. So I began making these paintings of swamps because Trump, kept on talking about draining the swamp. And I kind of looked up that phrase of draining the swamp, and kind of, it's being used by lots of people in different ways, different parties for different purposes. But the common denominator is that the swamp is seen as this wasteland. And, I'm living also right here in Skagit Valley, like on, bordering wetlands. I'm so lucky to be like on this, near this estuary of the Skagit River. My neighbor here, before she died, she was so upset about this giant nature conservancy project that we're bordering, that was restoring these wetlands, because it was like taking them back to wasteland, which, these like Swedish and Norwegian farmers had worked so hard to drain, and turn into farmland. And so it was so stark, right? That mentality was like right there. And then this, history of sort of seeing a swamp as a kind of like a dumping ground, in the South, there environmental toxic, chemical plants and toxic dumping in these areas, and that disproportionately affects people of color, and so who are living in these less expensive areas, and so rural areas. So it's just like it was all coming together for me. The wetland as a kind of really misunderstood, like from the colonial period. William Byrd said the Great Dismal Swamp was a vast body of mire and nastiness, and then it's so in contrast to along with rainforests and coral reefs, wetlands are like the most biodiverse places on earth. Like we need more and more of them. We need them. They're food producers for the food chain, so many animals depend on these places. And and we're like getting rid of them faster than we're restoring them by far, twice as fast. So there's that. And then there's this, white supremacist history, which hasn't, no matter how we try to bury it, or drown it or suppress it, it apparently is alive and well. Apparently it's been influencing our politics, our policing, our voting rights. It's all very much alive. It's not over. And I think that people of color in this country have carried this burden a long time, and they've been asking their enlightened white sisters and brothers to like do something, say something. And I think that Portland is like really showing us, like right now, like really stepping up in a very dramatic way. Anyway, I felt called, because of my past and because of where I come from, to find a way to deal with the subject matter. So I just started putting these Confederate monuments into swamps, not like, oh, that's what people should do with Confederate monuments, throw them into swamps. I don't think we should throw anything into swamps. Like, I think, but anyway, but we have a history of throwing cars, washing machines, dead bodies, into swamps. So I'm throwing these Confederate monuments into swamps. I'm throwing them with kind of the detritus of human history, like the kind of misadventures and mistakes. And how does it change right now? I mean, I just feel like it feels like I'm kind of, it's kind of like the moment is where I am, and I'm in this moment with my work. It's rare that you get to do that, right? Because often your work is like, you can't, especially if you're a painter or a sculptor, you can't immediately react to current events. But current events have definitely caught up with me. So the newest painting is Richmond. I mean, they're all dealing with specific places. I did a big road trip through the South on my sabbatical, lots of new material, and I'm working with it all right now. But Richmond will have the Robert E. Lee monument covered with graffiti underwater in the swamp with other things with plants made out of fragments of all the, of images of so many people that have been killed because they're Black through police brutality. I'm just kind of fragmenting a lot of images and making plants out of them. So it's really not all that discernible.
Oh, no.
But anyway, these paintings are using painting and transfer. So that's how I'm kind of able to have more, legible situations with all, with the use of photography that is getting transferred. None of them, they're not collage. So even though this is collage, it all gets transferred. So, so in the end, it's just the toner that's been, kind of adhering to the film of the paint, and it gets layered with paint and everything. So there's no collage in it. Robert Hargrave taught me how to do transfer. He's a brilliant painter of transfer, and I brought him up as a visiting artist, and he was very generous with all my students and taught them these things. And I was just like demoing based, a couple of years out based on Robert Hargrave's demo. And then I was just like, I need to just use this. So I have thanked him. I feel very grateful to him for showing me that technique.
Yeah, I love his work, actually. I've been trying to get in touch with him. Maybe you can help me. Yeah, I think the other thing for me that's been really interesting in watching you over time, and I'm not sure if you really think about it this way, but I feel like when I first started seeing your work, it was, these solid forms and kind of what was above the water versus what was underneath. And then we started going underwater, and now they're just these like very otherworldly underwater scenes. And I'm just enjoying watching kind of you work with similar imagery or subject matter, but just taking it to these very different outcomes has been really, really fun to watch for the past few years. So it's exciting to see what's happening now.
Thank you. Yeah. It hasn't always been a seamless transition. I mean, there have been definitely missteps and gaps, but right now I feel like the work I'm doing in Swamp Garden is kind of like one of the peak moments, like the icebergs and crack prospects, the glaciers. I just feel very like I'm cooking right now. It's really, I've figured out some things and I'm rolling with it. So thank you. It's going better.
Yeah, that's always a really good feeling when it happens. And it does take a lot, of work to get there.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to wrap up for our conversation. But, people should feel free to go to your website outside of the CCA webpage. And do you want to tell them what that is and how to see more of your work on the web?
Well, definitely my website, and then on Instagram, it's Cynthia Camlin Studio, and that's more recent work and, ongoing. And so, and I basically use it for that. I don't really use it for social purposes. So I'm just pumping stuff on there, when I have new things to see. So that and my website and the show in Hood River. And hopefully many shows to come.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for taking some time to speak with me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the relationship, and it seems like it's going to be a great show. I'm very happy to be with the other artists.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah.